Thank you. All right, so hello, welcome to our second meeting of the Financial Audit Advisory Committee for this year. Just for those who are not on, when we met with the auditors last time, we heard their reports, and then we started to talk about special projects. And since we had a number of new folks on the committee and there were some questions and we were still looking for some ideas, we decided to reconvene just as a committee so that we could finalize those discussions and our suggestions for special projects for this year's audit. So we'll do that. And then there were a couple sort of other questions, both for our new members and from folks who had been on before about kind of what the scope of this committee is and what the work is and what we do. So I thought we'd spend a little bit of time on that, both looking through, and I think Lisa just sent around the rules, which outline the scope of our work, and some areas that we might dive into a little bit more or discuss. So that is our agenda for today. Anything else on people's minds? All right. So let's jump right in. And my apologies. I think last time I was perhaps sort of informal, and hopefully that's okay in this subcommittee setting. For me on Zoom, it's much easier to go by first names. And since we're in a subcommittee, hopefully that's okay. If you have any questions or concerns about that, let me know. But we will proceed like that today. Anyway, hopefully we can do these discussions of the special projects. Alicia, Chair Peterloo, I know you had talked with folks on the school side, so maybe we can start there since that one might be a little more straightforward, and then we can talk about the city side as well. And of course, we can always decide to do two of one type, but I think last time we all agreed that having one in each category made sense for us generally. So do you want to kick things off with your ideas? Oh, cannot unmute. Maybe now?
Yeah, it worked. Thank you.
Great.
So I think Liam actually has already touched base with Steve, Liam, the CFO of NPS, and they suggested that we audit the athletics revolving account in conjunction with, we have an NEASC, which is like the national, I don't know, or the New England Athletics School, something or other. They're doing a review of our athletics programs overall, so it would sort of be a nice dovetail with that to have the financial side audited, the revolving account. So that was their suggestion. It sounds good to me. Open to the idea that there might be higher priorities on the city side. So,
do you folks want to chat about that a little bit? Do people have questions or initial reactions?
Is that the account for playing on a team?
I think it's not for playing on a specific team. I think it's like the overall athletics account. So we collect fees for different things. Maybe Steve even knows better than I do exactly what goes into this account. But we collect athletics fees for different sports. And then there's like equipment purchases, there's stipends that go to coaches and stuff like that. I don't know if Steve, if you have other.
Yeah, that basically sums it up. I was going to open what last year's revenues and expenses were just to give people a scope of the dollar value.
That'd be great. While you do that, Patrick, it looks like you're unmuted. Did you have something to share?
I think if there's one area within the school budget that I think deserves scrutiny, is anything related to special education, because that's where the pressure on the budget is coming from. In my analysis, if we had spent the same on a per student basis as our peers on special education aids, it's a $14 million delta, which is about the size of what's thought of as being the structural deficit in the school budget. So anything, and also how we get reimbursed by the state, the circuit breaker stuff. I think that within the school budget, those are the things that probably deserve the most scrutiny from an audit perspective.
Yeah, we did circuit breaker last year. I believe. And then I don't know if the auditors want to chime in, but I totally agree with you that that's like where our big expenditures are compared to other districts. I don't know if they are the right subjects for this kind of audit. I think we've typically looked at buckets of accounts, whereas aides are sort of a personnel line within staffing. So I don't know if the auditors have opinions on that.
So it's just us today, although we can bring
Are there-
questions back to them. I guess I would agree, and perhaps, but think one of the things I did want to talk about a little bit later is it seems like a lot of our questions and the questions we get from the public are a little bit more of this kind of why or how do we compare and all of that. And, some of that was within the scope of the audits, and some of this, we don't get the answers to through this process. So, looking within the scope of our rules, if there were ideas or things we thought that made sense for us to kind of figure out how to get those questions answered as well. So just to throw that out there, we can talk about that piece later, but it is, I think, a challenge when you've looked back at the projects that have been done before. For those who've been on the committee for longer, there are a lot of things that it seems like we want to get a little bit more context and kind of procedure around, rather than just the financial accounting piece. So
I would also say the other thing, the other issue facing the schools is the teacher absenteeism problem and our use of substitutes. And that we do use am I correct? We're still using this, Alicia, we're still using getting an outsourced firm.
It's a combination of folks that we have hired inside, and then Precision outsourcing, and then a couple other vendors that do some other outsourcing. Yeah, it's a big number. But again, I don't see how an audit. I mean, we know how much we spend on it. It's a question about whether we should be spending that and how to address teacher absences. It's not really a question of how do we use an audit process to, clear up information or anything like that. We have the information. We don't like it. We have it.
interesting. Alex, we'll jump to you and then we can close the loop on this.
Appreciate it, Martha. I would agree with Alicia. The Patrick, totally understand where you're coming from, but that's more of budget allocation questions than it is audit per se. Also, as said, the circuit breaker was actually one of the special projects that we just wrapped up last year. So I would agree with that had we not touched it, but we just did. So I would also push back against those. I think on the athletic fee one, I think that's a good one to look at. If we don't have higher priority city side ones, I generally think that Liam is pretty spot on with his recommendations on things to look at, just based on my experience with him. So I think it's a good area to look at. We have money that's coming in. I think it's good to make sure it is a great opportunity for us to also evaluate on the policy side of things, just our collections procedures within NPS. So I think it's able to touch upon a number of different things. Definitely could fit within the hours allocation that we get from our auditors. So I think I'm good with this recommendation.
Steve?
So I have the numbers now, and I think this could also it does kind of bleed into the school's general fund. So just focusing on North and South athletics, because in my conversations with Liam, it sounded like those would be the schools. The middle schools have a little bit of revenues and expenses coming in. But last year, between North and South, they spent 2.7 million. They took in 1.1 million in revenue, and the school general fund subsidized those programs by 1.5 million. And that's common. They subsidize them by somewhere between 1.3, 1.5, 1.6 each year. I think that's to keep the athletics costs low for families, so ensure that they can participate in these programs.
That's interesting. That's substantial. I guess having just paid some middle school sports fees, I might encourage including them if it's within the scope. But I get that it's
Just a
probably
perspective,
small.
Bigelow, Brown, Day, and Oakdale combined for 344,000 in
Oh,
expenses.
interesting. Huh. Wonder what the difference is. Any other thoughts on this one?
If it's not just team playing on a team fees, what else was there? I thought it was all about playing on teams.
Yes, that's where the fees come from. I think the expenditures then go to equipment, and
Oh, okay. Yeah, right, right. But
like that.
the money raised is only for
The
people
rate
playing.
would be from fees, and then as Steve mentioned, from the operating budget, we subsidize.
Yeah, okay.
And you'll see coaching stipends, paying for officials, transportation to and from games, maybe field rentals.
Alex?
Yeah, brief follow-up. So, brings up a good question. Ticket revenue for football and basketball, does that go to the boosters or does that go to this account? Do we know?
That's a good question.
Off
I
the
think
top of my head, I don't know.
it might go to the boosters. And the only reason I
Right.
think that is
That's
that
what I thought.
that we've been looking at putting ads on those tickets. So if we adjust one of our policies that would allow us to fundraise in that way, we can add ads to those tickets and raise more money. And we discussed that money would also probably go to boosters. So I feel like it probably does right now, but I can get that answer.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you.
Julia?
Steve might know this better, but I thought in some years past, I don't know, maybe it's 4, 5, 6 years, that we had the special project be the like game receipts for the football game or something like that. So I don't know if it does go to the city or maybe there's some kind of split between the city and the boosters.
There definitely was a review, it probably was 5 years ago, of game receipts and how those monies are taken in at the game.
That's what I'm remembering. Yeah.
At this point, I forget the granular details, excuse me, of that, but I can try and look back.
Okay. So I think recognizing the sort of areas of concern that Patrick surfaced at the beginning, and trying to think of ways that we can, either as a committee or with our other hats on in different roles in the city, figuring out some of those. Are people comfortable generally going forward with the athletics as the special project for this year? I'm seeing nodding. Do we need to vote, Lisa, or this is just a recommendation?
I don't think you need to vote, but
Okay.
can't hurt.
Okay. Maybe we'll call it a straw vote. Is everybody in favor of proceeding with athletics? Thumbs up, raise your hand, nod vigorously. Thank you. All right, Patrick, that's a thank you. Not a question, but a support. Thank you. Okay, let's go forward with that. We'll figure out the exact scope to send to the auditors after this. So city side, we had 2 ideas come forward last time, fields and trees. Julia, do you want to, you had some correspondence with the auditors.
So I did talk to John Oliver and because and he said he wasn't sure that what he was interested in was something that looking at it via the special projects process would answer the questions. So I had him write up what he was interested in. I sent that to Jim Petrowski along with my sort of description of the tree preservation fund sources and uses and where the money comes from and where it goes. And basically, Jim said they could manage to do both. I would imagine that if they do both, and he said they could do both and do a school project. But I would imagine if they are doing both, they would be less thorough, perhaps, than they could be if they were just focusing on one. But his comments were so basically let me just give you a recap here. What John said in his recap, the various youth sports clubs, soccer, baseball, football, lacrosse, etc., all collect a fee for each player on behalf of the city. These fees are intended to be used to improve the fields they are using. The conversation at the commission, that would be Parks and Recreation Commission, a few years ago centered on the fee, who should pay it, how frequently, and where the funds should be used. One of the tenets of the fee structure itself is that fields are different from baseball diamonds. Diamonds require infrastructure like dugouts, etc. Therefore, it was discussed that the fees collected be used in a manner that honors that difference. Square grass fields would receive the percent of fees collected from non-baseball and vice versa. He didn't like that way of setting it up, but that was the deal. And his interest is to see if that is how it is happening. And with regard to the tree ordinance, some of you are maybe more familiar with it than others. Basically, it's developers are now anyone, including homeowners, removing trees over 40 inches in diameter, either plant replacement inches or pay into the tree preservation fund as compensation for the environmental effects of tree removal. And we recently, it's like 3 years now, we changed the replacement in schedule so that it escalates more than linearly for the largest size trees. And there's documentation that the applicant has to provide, and they have to have an arborist who signs off that at the end of a project that inches that were going to be replaced or compensated for have been replaced. And there's, in my view, there's kind of a large reliance on now the honesty of the arborists, which is supposed to be reliable because they're professionals, and sign a statement that they're not sort of basically being influenced or bribed by the developer to say this tree is dead when it isn't, and all that stuff. And then we get money in lieu of trees that are not replaced. So it's never been audited in any way, and because of Mark Welch's bandwidth, he's not spot checking everything. He can look at maps, aerial views, and see if trees that were supposed to remain have remained, and so on and so forth. But there hasn't really been a review of the fund. And as I think mentioned at the past meeting, the balance has built up, and that is somewhat understandable because it can be, the use is basically is to support the urban forestry program. And if there's it has been used in the past and will be used for sort of major equipment purchases. And so there could be a buildup in the fund until it's depleted by an equipment purchase, as well as tree maintenance and tree planting and so forth. As I said, my concern was how well are we collecting all that we should be from developers in particular, and I am not too worried that we're spending it on uses other than forestry, but that's, of course, something that we could check. So Jim's response was that both concerns seem to be related to the revenue collection side. The concern being the allocation of funds from the field standpoint and the completeness of receipts being collected from the tree preservation purposes. And he said that generally we find the evaluation of revenue collection and policy to be more beneficial for our special projects for the audit, as these processes are typically managed by the departments and require discussion to obtain an understanding of the overall processes as well as provide recommendations. So he said, I feel we could gauge both concerns expressed below in obtaining an understanding of these collection processes, and they'd certainly be includable in our project scope. And as I said, he said they could manage to look at both if we want to do that.
Thoughts, reactions, questions? That was a lot of information. So go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, well, Julia, thanks for reaching out. That was good information. I think if we're able to, if we have the hours to be able to do both, that's great. If I had to choose between the two, I would probably go with the tree fund. Just given, I think it's become very, very topical also within the city in the last couple of years, just given all the development within the city. And I think that this would be a very good candidate to look at. So if we had to pick one, that would be my vote. But interested to hear what the rest of the committee thinks.
Others?
I agree. I like the trees.
Thanks.
And yeah, I also agree. Thank you, Julia, for digging in.
Great. Yeah.
And just one more thing. When I was talking to Jim, on the fields one, so he wanted to see where the money, like, is the money going to, is it being used as it was intended to be used in terms of the allocation between the different types of fields? And that seemed more like the spending side than the revenue side to me. But Jim said that it's really the question would be how they keep track of where the money's coming from. And once they have that information, it would be easy for them to basically follow the money, and is it going where in the allocation that was intended. And I think, but on the tree fund, as I recall, Steve, you told us the numbers last time, and the tree fund was a lot larger fund at the moment anyway, in terms of the balance and maybe in terms of the receipts as well.
So it started the year with about just over $2 million balance through, oh, sorry. No, this is, I still have up the end of last year. So last year ended with about 3.1, a little over that. As a fund balance at year end.
And that's FY 25.
That is FY 25. We've received 943,000 more to date, and we've spent 904,000 this year. We have 1.4 million encumbered, which I believe is tied largely to the purchase of a what do they call it, a cherry picker, or one of those
bucket truck
vehicles.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah,
I think they're bigger than cherry pickers. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks. Carl?
Yeah, I also like the tree ordinance one, especially with those kinds of numbers that Steve just mentioned. But Julia, could you just, I think you said this and I just missed it. What department oversees the sort of the management of that ordinance, reviewing the developers, what they're cutting down?
Actually, it's all both topics fall under Parks and Rec, trees and fields. Yeah.
It's within Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Okay. Great, thanks. Yeah, I would support that one again, particularly with those kind of numbers that Steve was talking about. I think that's real money.
Okay. So it seems like we've got a sense to maybe go back to the auditors, say, if you can do both, that's great. Our priority is the tree fund. So if they have a little bit of extra time, some information on the field stuff would be helpful too. But is that generally where people are comfortable going?
I'm happy with that. And also, I mean, we can also unless we have another idea for the following year, we can always keep feels for next year.
Yep. Yes, having a ongoing list seems helpful. So that way we don't have to hash these out all the time. Great. Okay, thank you. Can we just do another straw vote? Priority tree fund, if extra time fields. All in favor, nod your head, thumbs up, raise your hand. Thank you. Great. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you all. This will be interesting to get more information on, and we will keep you posted along the way if there's developments that the committee needs to know. So in the last bit of our time here, first thing, I guess, which relates to perhaps going a little bit out of order. Last night we did, the Finance Committee met, so this goes in the coordination with other parts of government, and heard the audit report. My apologies for not letting the whole committee know that that was coming last night. Things have been moving quickly with budget season, but thank you, Alex, for being there. And it was great to hear from the auditors in that context as well. And one notable takeaway was just this was a really great audit. I think we didn't hear that as much when we met with the committee, but it was great to hear the report to finance that this was a very strong audit from us. So congratulations to our financial team, Steve, and your whole crew on that. And that came out last night. Much appreciation for how strong that all went. So that was great. And then I just wanted to open up a little bit. Again, this question. So I'm new here. Some of you have been on for a while. We have some new counselors. We have folks who've, Julia had ably chaired this committee last term. But I know some questions had arisen kind of about the scope of the committee and our work. So to take these other, bullet points somewhat together, I guess, and if you've had a chance to look at the rules, which outlines our scope of work, just to kind of, ask ourselves, are there other things we could be doing, within our rules that we should be doing, and perhaps this sort of broader question of, are there ways within our committee or working with other parts of government that we could get to some of these why questions that have arisen from some of the topics that came up on special projects. And last time we met, we were talking about the water meters and other things. And Carl, you had talked about a little work you had done just to figure this out and how it had gone. And so, I thought that was an interesting example of getting some of the whys. So I guess it's a little bit more unstructured. We don't need to take a ton of time because it can be an ongoing conversation. But, and Alex, I know you'd raised some of these questions. So I don't know if you want to kick things off with any thoughts you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So Martha, also appreciate you putting this together. Essentially, yeah. So for the citizen members as well as Julia, who was with us last year, you guys are probably aware of the email that I sent out last in December, just about kind of just going through what our scope is, some of the kind of functions and advisory nature that we have within our scope. We do our main function very, very well. That is, if there's anything to focus on, it is what we do. And that part is we are doing effectively. The other functions that we have, and again, like the purpose of the committee, right, is to help the finance committee and to help the city council devote more time to fiscal matters. We are, as the citizen members, we're volunteers. We're here to assist in any way possible. And if those advisory functions are needed, that's fine too. I just wanted to be able to kind of have this conversation, see where we can kind of best assist here. There's, if you kind of go back into some of the documents from going back to the, kind of when this committee was first formed, there's been a couple different things that have happened in the past. For instance, there was a subcommittee on risk assessment that was deemed to be a little bit, out of scope, and things like that. internal control assessments that we've done. We've done policy assessments when it was deemed that we had policy deficiencies. So there's a number of different things that we can definitely do here. I think kind of the major one that stuck out to me, because we do obviously the financial statements part, external audit, compliance kind of goes along with all of that. With it, if we had any compliance deficiencies, which we don't, but it's really on the internal control side. Like I have no red flags or concerns personally with the way that the comptroller's office is doing. I think Steve, you know what I think of your office and the job that you guys do. This is more just of from an internal control assessment side, something we haven't done in a while. And I think just in my experience, I've within internal audit is never a bad idea to at least consider risk change over time. And controls can always be updated. So I don't think it's necessarily, a terrible idea to potentially, take a look at some of those things, do a policy review, things like that. Never a bad idea to have outside eyes, assist in some of those things. So those were just some of the, the kind of general ideas that I had. Again, at the end of the day, with how this committee is structured in a very special way compared to some of our other boards and commissions, being kind of a subcommittee and a hybrid of both council members and citizen members. So, at the end of the day, really, we're here to best assist you guys, the counselors on the call. So, just wanted to be able to at least have this discussion because we, as I said, we haven't met without the auditors since I joined, and I'm coming up on the end of my third year here. So just thought it was worth a discussion. And again, if the idea is, hey, we're doing what we want to do, and that's good, that's fine with me. But I just wanted to be able to have the conversation.
Thanks. Any initial reactions, especially from those who kind of were on before and had these seeds planted previously?
So I agree that reading the description of the goals and scope of the committee as it was written up. I don't know how many years ago it was established. I think we're talking like maybe
2012 or 14.
Okay, I was right. I would have guessed like 15.
Board of Aldermen was still used in the initial founding document. So there's at least a timestamp with that.
Yeah. So before I was paying attention to much besides trees. And I used to attend financial audit committee meetings, even when I was not on the committee or chairing it. I think I went straight from not being on it to chairing it. And I had never, as you said, I've never seen anything but the meetings on the schedule connected with the outside auditors and that timetable. And I'd never seen anything done besides that. I think there have been, I think it came up through the external auditors, but in the past, and Steve might remember this, there were comments in the management letter to do with controls like the sort of closing off people's access to whether it's email or accounts or like checking that access is removed when people leave. And I think it's supposed to be removed when people leave. I mean, we just had an issue with, Cassidy left and her Zoom links didn't work. But I think one of the comments I recall in a past management letter was that there was not a sort of even a regular annual review of had all access to city systems been discontinued for employees who had left. So that's sort of an example of the, I think, internal control thing that I think that's been cleaned up now, but I don't know if there's anything else like that we ought to be looking at.
If you'd like, I can speak a little bit on some of the higher level internal control stuff that we have in place. But as you had mentioned, Julia, that that was an issue, and I think that stemmed largely from IT not being notified because they're not part of or hadn't been part of notification for either termination or somebody leaving, as far as like stopping payroll and going through the paperwork for personnel forms. So it was on the department to notify IT when somebody was either coming into or leaving their department. And a lot of times that slipped through the cracks, and that was an issue a couple of years ago that had since been remedied, as far as I know. As far as like accounting type internal controls, we have a lot of workflow in place. For example, if there's an invoice to be paid, it's entered at the departmental level, supported with backup. So they attach the invoice behind it. That gets reviewed by their boss, that then gets sent to my office to be reviewed by my staff and processed. So there's a series of workflow sense like that, similar for payroll and also for cash receipts. Schools also, they have a little bit more, or because their numbers are so big, they're one of the only departments that we've actually pushed out something where they can enter a journal entry or a budget adjustment, and then it gets approved by their boss, either it's usually Amy or Alyssa, and then that flows through us and we review it and look at the support and backup before we would post it or kick it back to them. So as far to like day-to-day operations, we do have a lot of those workflows and controls in place. And that is something that the auditors will look at. They'll pull 50 invoices through the system and sit down with me and go through and have me show, the approvals, everyone who reviewed and approved an invoice, for example. And then a lot of permissions are set up, or I guess all permissions are set up through IT. They are the controller of permissions. And if a change in request for permissions comes through, then I'm CC'd on it to make sure somebody should or should not have permissions to do something.
Just following up on user access, not to focus in on just one particular item. Do you guys do a segregation of duties annual review as well?
I don't know if it's done annually, but we certainly have done it multiple times where somebody that can enter something, if you're a person that enters it, you don't approve it, something like that. Enter, or I have access to enter a rec. I don't even have access as comptroller to approve a rec. So it's just that workflow, so we can't push it all the way through with one individual.
Interesting. Well, just even talking about this right now, I think is a little bit of a peek into it a little bit more for the rest of us. So this was helpful to me. Thank you. Alex, did you have any other pieces you want to talk about, or did people have other thoughts or reactions right now? Carl, jump over to you.
I was actually going to ask Carl, given Carl's extensive experience within the municipal space, would love to hear, Carl, what you've seen in the different towns and cities that, you've been the administrator in, kind of what, some of the other cities and towns kind of do in this area.
Thanks. I would say in general, what I've seen of the operations here in internal controls are near the top. I think they really do a thorough job in many ways, and in many of the comments that the auditors make, I shouldn't say many. I would say probably maybe 25% of their recommendations are they're very minor, right? I'll give you an analogy. They'll tell the city your shoe is untied, and their recommendation is tie your shoe. But that's, again, that's maybe, it's just a reflection of, I think the city does in general a pretty good job. My one question I think could help all of us, and this, I think this would be devoted to Steve. This question is, how many hours does the city budget for the auditors to do these special studies? Because my sense is it's somewhat limited, and so we have to be cognizant of that. If we, if we're only buying 20 hours of time, we can't expect, extensive testing in a detailed report or so forth. So, um, and we've talked about it a little bit at the committee level in the past, but other than the auditor saying, don't worry about it, I don't think we've had a better sense of if what we're asking is more complex than the amount of hours that are budgeted within the audit for that work.
I'm trying to open the contract now, but I believe it is either 20 per project or 20 overall for the projects. So it'd be 10 and 10.
Yeah, my recollection was they'd go to like 25 hours or something like that. But I thought that was sort of for the entire, however many we wanted to fit in there, not a per project basis, especially if it's 20 or 25 total, doesn't seem like a lot to me.
If that's the number, I would agree. That's pretty limited in scope, and that may speak to why some of the recommendations they made are so, somewhat insignificant recommendations, because they can only spread themselves so thin on these projects. So I think, like the two projects we talked about today, which I like both of them. I think they're both meaty projects, but I would want to have some feedback from the auditors about how much they feel they could do if it's, let's say it's, a total of 25 hours, how much they could get into the issue at sort of that limited number of hours.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of more comfortable with not having them try to do three things, but just keep it to the two.
One thought that's coming up with all of these is, we're also entering budget season. And so from the counselor side, some of these questions that come up around, right now we're looking at last year's audit, obviously, and the special projects and all of that. But some of the kind of the why pieces to the questions that we've asked, can then be also raised during budget season, because it is a connection between the financial piece and the broader kind of programmatic work of a department or the city side. So that's one piece that could kind of connect the work from this committee and the audit into these broader questions, or in terms of the controls as well, kind of the why and the how. Another idea would be if we have these projects and the scope of the auditors is limited, some group of us, obviously being very respectful of the department head's time and all of that, could meet with the department as well and talk through a little bit of the connections between the audit and the broader programmatic questions. So those wouldn't necessarily be full committee meetings or anything like that. But if one or two members of the committee, we wanted to do it some way where folks who are able and interested could do some sort of follow-up meeting or connection, I think that would be within the scope of our rules. So those are just a few ideas.
We've also utilized subcommittees in the past. So if we do have to more formalize it, that is something that we could also do. I did have one quick question for Steve also. Do you know when, or anyone else on the call, do we know when CLA's current contract is up actually for renewal?
So the most recent contract covered the 24, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, I think. So they're through the 28 audit.
Okay.
I believe they just finished the second year of 5-year contract.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Carl? I think you're on mute, sorry. Can you unmute?
My apologies. The only thing I'd add to your comment about looking at programmatic ideas, and I think that's what Patrick was raising when he talked about special education. That's a a huge number, but it's programmatic, and the auditors really aren't staffed to handle programmatic things. That's just not their thing to do. I'm not saying it's not important, but those types of studies, if this committee took it on, I think would be working directly with departments, again, being sensitive to their time and other commitments they have. I think it would be interesting to do if it could be done, but I don't think you could rely much. I don't think you rely at all on the auditors to be helpful. They look at financial controls. That's what they're supposed to do and they're trained to do. And they don't have either the staff nor within their scope to do programmatic types of reviews.
I should mention with special ed in particular that we are undergoing a program review of special ed. An outside consultancy has come in and is looking at things like caseloads. So we will have some good data on that, I believe, by the fall.
Great. That's good to know. Oh, Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand that it's we're looking at controls and stuff. I'm just flagging the issue as just because the dollar amounts, because that's where we have very, very large dollars. When you kind of follow the money, you might find something. Same thing with the use of substitutes, and we do use an outside firm there. And the only other thing that I can think of that's out there that looks unusual, but maybe not, as you hear about in other towns, is the amount of overtime that's used by the police force.
Interesting. Well, I will definitely, those are all great ones to keep in the lineup for next year as well. So I'll actually just write all those down right now. Thank you. All right. Well, I think we've both gotten some interesting info on how things work right now, floated some ideas for the future and the potential work of this committee as well. Anybody have any additional thoughts at this time or ideas for concrete next steps if needed at the moment? Good. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us again this morning. At the moment, we will report back to the auditors with our ideas on special projects. I think we can all keep in mind some of the stuff we talked about going forward. And then we will not meet again for a little bit, but we will let everybody know when the next meeting will be, probably after the summer at this point. And then we will meet again before the end of the year, and that would put us at 4. So that will be our schedule going forward, unless anything comes up that we need to convene about as a group. Yes, Steve.
I just got the answer for the hours. It's 20 to 25 hours committed between the projects.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. That's helpful. Okay. With that, unless anybody has anything else today, we will adjourn and we will see you all after the summer. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay,
Martha.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.